So, we are going to start discussion. As usual, when we have one-day retreat, we include one discussion session. But today I see very short, 1 hour discussion. Usually we have 1.5 hours. Today 1 hour. Anyway, we have some other programs later. So already we have spoken or conducted some activities in the morning. So for this session, we welcome you, Venerable Chuan Guan. We welcome Venerable Chuan Guan to attend this session and invite to start this session giving an 1 hour talk, then we don't have to discuss anything. Alright, can start. Short talk.
Good afternoon, Bhante. Good afternoon, Venerable. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. How are you all today? Good? It's lovely to see the hall fill up. So, as Bhante said, we have 1 hour. We're supposed to have a Dhamma talk plus Dhamma discussion. So how? Can you all hear me from behind? Okay. So, today is quite special, or in a way quite different. Because usually when I come over for the session, I'll just drop by around 2:45 and then come in for the session. We'll have the talk and then the discussion, and then after that I'll go back. But a few days back, I just came back from Lanka, and as you all know, there was a horrific bombing in Lanka. I was there with a group of students for a retreat. They were very fortunate. They came back one day just before the bombing. I stayed for another 6 days. It's not something trivial. Yeah. It's something of a tragedy. As of today, I think 290 over individuals have been counted to have passed away. Yeah. In a way, that's like a grim reminder, yeah, of the mortality of our life. So, in the first 1 or 2 days after the bombing, in fact, in the first few hours or the first day, communication was still up, and then some students started texting me like, how are things? And in the middle, maybe about towards the end of the first day or the second day or so, communication started to be cut off. Yeah. For a while, I thought my students are, being very rude. I send them messages and they don't read. Yeah. Then after a while, I realized that no, it's not that they are not reading; it's that my messages are not even going out. And in a way, then it dawned on me the severity of it. But what I shared with them before then was something I want to ask you all today. Yeah. The bombing didn't happen in Singapore. Yeah. So it seems like, we can meditate today, we can meditate tomorrow. We can meditate any day. Thank you. Singapore, we enjoy relative peace. Yeah. So sometimes we may put off our practice. Yeah. We wait for Labor Day to practice. We wait for the weekend to practice. But sometimes weekend we have something on. We wait for the public holidays. Yeah. We wait for Bhante to arrange a retreat, then we practice. Sometimes even when Bhante arranges a retreat, we are not free. So I'm very happy today to see so many of you take the time to come. Just because it's a public holiday doesn't mean that we are free. Yeah. But when are we free? Yeah. When are we free? We are free when we are ready. When we are ready, we are free. Yeah. Or as I put to the participants during the retreat, when we are desperate. Are you all desperate? Some of you have been hearing me talk about desperation for the past 1 week. I suspect this will be my theme of talk for the next maybe a few months, up to maybe a year, maybe for the rest of my life. Then it will become boring. But why desperation? Do you all feel desperate? No, huh? Yeah. We all feel desperate actually, but we feel desperate for different things. There are those who feel desperate for the new iPhone, then they go and queue up. For those who don't feel desperate about it, we look at them and wonder, what's the big deal? Yeah. We see people queue up at night for the launch of a product, launch of a new bag or new whatever. Yeah. For those of us who are not desperate for it, we look at them with question marks, with puzzle. Yeah. Almost incredible, almost foolish, if you will. For many things in our life, that we feel desperate about. Don't get me wrong. When I ask the question, "Are you desperate?" I don't mean it as an insult to you all. Desperation is a very powerful emotion. It makes us do things. So it makes people queue up for iPhone. It makes parents go and do volunteer work. Yeah. It even makes some parents shift house so that they can be within the 2.5 kilometers or 2 kilometers radius of the school. Yeah. When people are desperate enough, they will do things. Depending on whether you agree with what they are trying to get, you may say that it is passion or stupidity. Yeah? But each of us have our own things that we are desperate for. Do you agree? Say yes. Okay. If you think about it, and after a while you think, Venerable, I don't agree with you. It's okay also. If you find that in your life, in the past few years, in the past maybe 10 years, maybe in your whole life, you find that you have never been desperate for anything. You are not a person of any want. Oh, congratulations. maybe you are more enlightened than you know. But most of us have some things that we want. Maybe the want has not reached the point of desperation. Maybe desperation is a strong word. Yeah. But this occurred to me. Yeah. I don't dare to say that it's any kind of realization. It's just some random thoughts. But it occurred to me that in our day-to-day life, there are many things that we pursue. Yeah. We spend time, we spend effort, we spend resources going after. No one is in a position to tell you whether that's right or wrong, whether it's worthwhile or not. Yeah. Bhante can tell you everything. We can tell you this is not worthwhile, that is more worthy, but ultimately you must make the decision. We must each make our own decision. But there's one thing that if we consider ourselves a meditator, that you must be desperate for. Yeah, and it is, Bhante may not agree. You must be desperate for jhana. But another thing that you should be desperate for, Bhante should agree, is nibbana. Yeah. Are you all desperate for nibbana? Is it? Not much people say yes. But that's normal. Yeah. And that's normal. Because if you are truly desperate for jhana or nibbana, then when you are sitting and your leg is painful, and then there's itch here, there's ache there, you wouldn't care about it. But most of the time, when there's some ache, yeah, what happened? Our mind go into essay mode. What do you mean by essay mode? It start to write a lot of stories. Yeah. Spin all kinds of stories about what will happen if you don't move. Your leg is going to break. You must move your leg now. You're going to die. You can't breathe now. You need to move. You need to open your eyes. Yeah. Our mind will start to spin all kinds of stories. How many of you ever sit until you feel like your leg is going to break? So few. The rest of you? Either very good sitter, that means you sit for 2 hours. Bhante, for us, no problem. We sit for 2 hours, we don't have to move. Never feel that way before. Huh? Or you sit for 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, then you shift. Yeah? Which one is it? Do you all shift or do you all don't shift? Shift, yes. So you are the shifter meditator. Yes. Yeah. That's okay, that's normal. Yeah. It means that you are still alive. Yeah. Only statues don't move. There's nothing wrong with shifting, actually. Yeah. If you feel extreme pain, why don't you shift? You should shift. Yeah. But if the only response to pain is to shift, then again you're not getting anything out of the sit. Because before you sit, your leg is not painful. Then you sit for a while, your leg is painful. By shifting, you're just going back to square one. You're just going back to no pain. If you had wanted no pain so much, then don't sit. Make sense or not? Not that we sit to have pain. We sit to learn something about the pain, about this body, isn't it? Yeah, that's the whole point of mindfulness, to learn something here. Not just to pass time, Passing time is easy, just sit around, look around, yeah. Pass time, that's called passing time. Or you can choose to close your eyes and just sit there. That's called passing time. Yeah. But if you want to develop awareness and mindfulness, whether it's pain or pleasure, whether it's physical or mental, you want to be aware, you want to know what's going on. You want to learn something about it. If someone opens the door and it disturbs you, you want to learn why it disturbs you. You want to learn the nature of that sound. What's going on? And from learning about that, maybe you may learn something about why the mind gets disturbed. Because then there's insight, isn't it? Because if you want to not be disturbed by other people's sound, very simple. Go and get the Bose noise cancellation earphone, and then lock yourself into your storeroom. But that's not meditation. That's not meditation. So when we do our sitting, good to consider, what are we doing? Whether it's 15 minutes or half an hour, or 1 hour or 2, it doesn't matter. But in the process of that sit, do you learn something? Can you imagine if every session you learn something? Oh. But many times before you get to learn anything, then there's that gnawing feeling, isn't it? That gnawing feeling, that fear that something bad is going to happen if you don't move. Or maybe it's just the pure pain that is overwhelming, that you just can't seem to face anymore. And again, we come back to desperation. Which are you more desperate for? Are you more desperate for relief from the pain, or are you more desperate for enlightenment? No model answer. No right or wrong answer. But good to check yourself. Because if you have been doing sitting for years and don't seem to get anywhere, then you need to ask yourself this question. Because if you're not desperate enough for it, of course you're not going to get anywhere. If each time there's a bit of pain and then you shift, of course you're not going to have a breakthrough into that pain. And the same goes, in a way, applies to the other parts of our life, isn't it? If each time we encounter something difficult, we encounter something of a minor obstacle, and we choose to reroute, turn back, then hard to make any progress. Hard to make any progress. But today, I feel that we are all very fortunate. We have Bhante, Venerable Wimalajothi, and so many brothers and sisters together. You know why it's so good to have so many people together? Do you know why? Peer pressure. Right? If you are at home, you sit for maybe 1 hour, then you're like, I feel so tired, I need to rest. Then you just rest. But over here, Bhante set up the whole day, session after session. Even tea break, there's peer pressure to have tea break. When you see everybody go for tea break, you must have a tea break. But those are important, Some of us may feel like, how come there's so many, there's tea break. Tea breaks are important, Do you all realize tea breaks are important? You all don't realize, right? Tea breaks are important. Because if you simply just sit for the whole day and do continuous practices, most of us cannot take it. Because unless you have been doing this the whole year, suddenly from your normal schedule, you expect yourself to do continuous practice for the whole day, you'll just break your, the body will just break down. Yeah. There was one retreat, 7-day retreat, and there was one student who was like lamenting on how I keep on switching the schedule. Sit, walk, sit, walk, sit, walk. I refuse to let them do continuous sitting. So one of them was like, what happened, Bhante? That student, some places we can sit the whole day. So after that I said, okay, for those of you who wish to sit, can, I allow you. But make sure you do continuous sitting. After half a day, the person disappeared. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm not laughing at that person. Yeah, I think it's not a bad thing that a person have that fervor. Yeah. In a way, it's that desperation, but have to know our own present state. Yeah, our own present state. When to practice, when to rest. Then you can progress. So having a group together is very wholesome, very good, because of that peer pressure. But it is just for one day. Just for one day. After that, how? I think Bhante, there's some meditation on Saturday. Is it? Or which day?
Usually we had Tuesday, but it is not very regular now. Because
So
I am always absent on Tuesday.
So after this, you all should gather together and kneel down and beg Bhante.
No need. They can, if they are ready, we can choose another day.
Yeah.
Readiness is important.
Yes. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah. Keep up the practice. Yeah. Because that, in the long term, will serve in our practice a lot more. Yeah. So, yeah. Are you all desperate yet? Okay, Bhante.
All right. So, we have $34, huh? Then if you have some general questions or questions related to meditation, you can ask, huh? We can attend to few questions. Yes? You want to get some reading, right, about that?
I can have the... This one? Okay, so that I can have the reading, then I kind of read it first before I do my meditation.
So, I mentioned to you about the Satipatthana translation, and there are many books written about the Satipatthana Sutta. So, if you want readings, best are readings from Satipatthana Sutra. Our library has a few editions of the Satipatthana Sutra. Then you can borrow the books. See meditation section. If not, there are some other sutras related to this. I think this Venerable is expert, sutra expert, ask what sutra. Satipatthana Sutra, Madhyama Nikaya Satipatthana. Dīgha Nikaya long. And people have printed separately Satipatthana Sutra. Many materials. If you can't, you contact him.
There's a question.
Don't ask from me, ask from
Yeah, thank you, Bhante, all the Bhantes for the session. Yeah, I want to ask, in fact, about the four-element meditation just now that you have before this session. So you mentioned that the four elements doesn't belong to us, which is quite easy to understand. But the four element itself doesn't constitute the full us yet. We need another element called consciousness. Then that becomes the person. So when we dissolve, just like you mentioned, dissolve, the element goes back to the universe, the world. Then the consciousness move on. Okay. So this consciousness move on depending on whether you are Arahant. If you are Arahant, then this will disappear and go out of the samsaric cycle. But if you are due for rebirth, then you will go to another birth. So my question is that, can we equate this consciousness that moves after we dissolve, our body dissolve, and the element goes back to the earth, can go back to the universal consciousness, which in Hinduism is called the Atman, and or that's when you reach Nibbana, then you're already out of the samsaric cycle and go back to the universal consciousness known as Atman. And if you are due for rebirth, then just move on. So what's wrong with that concept of consciousness doing a rebirth, and when it's ready for out of samsara, it goes back to universal consciousness, which is always there. So what's wrong with this versus the Buddhist concept? That's all I want to ask.
You are confusing us a bit. Never want to answer a question.
I feel very tempted.
Tempted to answer.
But may not be what he wants
Desperate
to hear.
to answer. May I say a few?
Yes, please.
I really don't like to talk about universal consciousness. I don't believe it, and I not just don't believe, we got no reasons for that. So that is out. But you mentioned about four elements and mentioned there are other elements. Actually, there are two elements. Element of space, element of what you call consciousness, mental energy. So including these two, there are 6 elements. So when we talk about 4 elements, only one aspect, because our attachment is very strong towards these 4 elements. They are very obvious to us. We can see. We concern so much about our body, and that's why we pay special attention in our 4 elements meditation to this hardness of the body, liquidity of the body, then the what do you call heat of the body, then air element of the body. So we use those 4 for meditation. It is in a way quite convenient also to pay attention and see how they dissolve, how they come to this, how they exist within our form or body. So we meditate, it is easier. So you mentioned something about consciousness and universal consciousness also. I don't want to go to talk about rebirth when somebody passed away, how the consciousness linked to next birth or rebirth. But one thing I would like to mention, something I don't know also. It is linked with consciousness. What happened to Arahants when they passed away? Or what happened to their consciousness? When a normal person, usual person passed away, ordinary person passed away, we say his consciousness separate. It does not mean it doesn't change. Consciousness is ever changing. Rising, falling, rising, falling. It works in that way and linked to another rebirth. But the question asked, some people ask this question from the Buddha. When Arahants passed away, when Buddhas passed away, where is his consciousness go? Where is he going? Where is his consciousness is going? What happened to his consciousness? So what happened to him? So the Buddha had given what do you call examples, simile. By giving a simile, Buddha has answered it. If these two want to give details or better answer, they can do. The simile was the fire. When you make a fire, let us say you put firewood as fuel. So until firewood finish, fire exists. So in the end, fire stopped. When the fire stopped, you ask where that fire went. Just now fire is existing, but totally gone. Was it gone to right direction or left direction? Was it gone to left or right? If not, any other directions you can ask. But if you ask that question is wrong. We cannot say it went to this side or that side or any place, because fire existed because of fuel. In this particular case, firewood. Firewood finished, fire existed, fire came to stop. In the same way, our mental energy continue, one birth to another birth, and not going to a universal consciousness. But if we develop it up to the highest level, attain enlightenment by purifying our mental energy, the fuel goes away. What is the fuel for this continuation? It is all the defilements. So when an Arahant, when we talk about an Arahant, he has eradicated all the defilements. So no more fuel. Just like firewood finish, then fire disappeared, not going to anywhere. In the same way, when an Arahant reached that level, by eradicating all the defilements, the journey stopped. But the thing is, people don't like that, don't like to stop the journey, because they want to enjoy again and again.
They are desperate.
Desperate to enjoy. But if you are desperate to enjoy, you should be desperate to suffer also. Huh? So you cannot do two things. Huh? If you really want to get rid of suffering, if you are desperate to get rid of suffering, you must put to an end to this. End is eradicate all the defilements. So we don't go to any universal consciousness.
Can I just add something before you answer the question? You see, you mentioned about firewood extinguished. Now, if you equate fire with energy, the fire didn't disappear. It went from fire energy to some other energy, heat energy, and it's still existing as energy. So it doesn't just extinguish and become nothing. So by the same token, when the consciousness Arahant reach, it must go into something because it's still an energy. The fire didn't disappear. I think your answer about fire disappear is not totally correct from the scientific point of view. It just transformed from fire to heat to some other energy. So that's where it has gone. It has not disappeared.
If I may say something about it.
Yeah, I will give opportunity to engineer.
The thing about analogies is you cannot examine analogies beyond its original scope. Yeah, because for practically all analogies, if you tear apart and examine it further beyond its original scope, it will not stand. Because analogies are meant to work within a certain scope. Yeah. So when you go further and bring in physics and then examine what fire is, then it is going beyond the scope of the fire analogy that the Buddha used to the fire worshippers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
She wants to say something.
In Ratana Sutta, the last stanza explained about an Arahant, like Kinang Puranang Navannati Sambhavam Viratta Chitta Ayatike Babasmi Te Kina Bija Aviruli Chanda Nibbanti Dira Yathayam Padito. The Bhante explained the same thing, but that stanza has given different simile, like a lamb. Kinang Puranang, that person became an Arahant, the previous comers finished or has gone. No any previous comers. And Navang Natti Sambhavang, in future, no any comers. Is not going to create any newcomers. Viratta Chitta Ayatike Bhavasmi, and also he has no desire to future birth. Nibbanti Dhira, Dhira means that enlightened person, Nibbanti passed away or passing away or passing away as a lamp was off. When you blow off the lamp, you can't see the flame. Like that, you can't see the consciousness. Consciousness and the other four skandhas always goes together. In another stanza, explain Ayu Usmacha Vinyanam Yada Kayan Jahantimam Apaviddo Tadaseti Nirattangmo Kalingaram. When someone passed away, these three is combination as a person. Ayu, lifespan, Usmacha, heat of the body, then Vinyanam, consciousness. These three always exist together. If someone passed away, what happened is Ayu, his lifespan has finished, then Usmacha, his body heat also finished, then the Vinyanam goes away from the body. That Vinyana will connect with next birth. We call Chuti Chitta. The last thought moment we call Chutichitta. Then the next thought moment we call Patisandhichitta. That Vijnana will connect with Patisandhichitta with karmic force. Then if someone attain enlightenment, no karmic force and also no consciousness. And also Buddha never talked about this Brahman or Atman or universal consciousness.
Thank you.
This one behind.
Thank you, Bhante. Just now you said the 4 elements meditation can be used like vipassana meditation. I don't know if I heard that wrongly, but I don't really understand that. Can you explain, please? Thank you.
If we understand what is vipassana, not necessary to give any answer to your question. Some people think vipassana something very differently. They don't know, but they think vipassana is something very special. It is not special at all. Vipassana means seeing things as they really are, trying to understand ourselves based on reality. So, this 4 elements meditation is giving a very special understanding about ourselves. This body, we don't understand about our body. We think this is mine, this is belong to me. And when we see other bodies also belong to somebody else. And within this body, somebody exists, I exist, all these things. We think like that. But when we see 4 elements of the body, body means nothing but 4 elements, and those 4 elements are borrowed ones coming from outside. One day all goes out. And even we cannot control it, although we want to grab them. This is mine, this is belong to me, we can't grab. One day 4 elements disintegrated, goes away, and we have no control. This is a reality about our body. So if we can understand about this body, which we always think mine, belong to me, this is very precious to me, and see there is nothing there for us to grab. This is also part of vipassana, seeing the reality, impermanence, changes.
According to the Buddha Dhamma, Buddha explained there are 4 perversions. The word in Pali, vipallasa. We have 4 perversions. We always think wrong way. Buddha explained anicce niccang passati. We always think the impermanent things as permanent things. And also the second one is asubhe subham passati. Impure things, we always think pure things. And also the last one is anatte attham passati. None soul or none atman, we always think there's an atma. That's the wrong way. We have to realize this. If we can realize this, that is also vipassana meditation. We have to realize what is permanent. There is no permanent things. All the things are impermanent. Component things are impermanent. Impermanence and also all the component things are not pure, all are impure, and also third one I can't remember. Asubhe subang pasati. Asubhe also unpleasant thing. We always think pleasant thing as pleasant thing, and also the non-soul. We always think there's a soul. That's the way Buddha explained. If we have these four perversions or wrong views, then we can't understand the reality of the body. That is the vipassana. If we can realize these four things, then that is another way to explain the vipassana.
Anything?
Good afternoon, Venerable Guan. I just want to ask one question regarding mana and alaya. Because this mana and alaya, I understand that when the person pass off, the mana will sink into the alaya. Then after that, it carries on. So what does that difference with the Theravada teaching of mana? Because I look at it like there's some difference. Can you please explain? Thank you.
Very good question. We will have to cancel the next two sessions and then extend until Sunday to explain. He is asking about the Yogacara school. Yeah. So mana is referring to the mind, and then Vijnana is basically Vijnana, the consciousness. You mentioned about mana, what? Entering into the Vijnana? Yeah. So if we go back to some of the texts, the description may sometimes describe as though the mana consciousness sink back into the alaya consciousness. But truly, if we talk about alaya consciousness, the storage consciousness, then storage consciousness, the relation between storage consciousness, which is the eighth consciousness, and the first seven don't sink back into the eighth consciousness, but rather it leaves an imprint in the eighth consciousness. But in a way, it's linked back to the earlier question about consciousness, and then of course the question is in a slightly different angle. So I actually don't know what you want to ask. Oh, okay. What's the difference? In today, when we think about Theravada school, in the Chinese Tripitaka, it covers commentary of various schools. The present day Theravada is one of the 9 Theravada schools from the 18 schools. So there are a lot of differing views on this, yeah. But most of the schools that you can group them into two main groups. One which recognizes the alaya consciousness, and the rest basically don't recognize that. But while not recognizing that, they recognize that there is subtle consciousness. Yeah, a subtle consciousness that arises in the new birth. So, to me, you can look at it as a difference in terms. Yeah, a difference in terms. There's a whole background as to why alaya consciousness, yeah, and at the point of the time of Venerable Asanga, why this was established, and it was to counter the wrong grasping of emptiness, and that in turn, at the time of Nagarjuna, Venerable Nagarjuna was established to counter those practitioners who were grasping onto the two extreme views. But I thought maybe what's more interesting is to link it back to the soul or no soul. How many of you think that there's no soul? Oh, so few. How many of you think that there's a soul? How many of you don't know what I'm talking about? Standard Singaporean. Yeah. So, you see, in the Buddha's teaching, the three universal characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So, rightly speaking, anyone who take refuge in the Triple Gem should subscribe to this teaching, right? We may not have personally realized it, but we should say, okay, I haven't realized it, but I take refuge in the Buddha and his teaching, and by extension, I would take it based on conviction first. Yeah. The tricky part is, while we may take it on conviction, if I now ask you, who was the person who was here in the morning reciting Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami? Who? Rightly speaking, you say, we, right? You are the one who did that, right? So now if you try to recall that person, where's that person now? Where's that person now? Huh? Gone, huh? Is it gone? Or is it this same person here? Yeah, so maybe gone, maybe it's the same person. Yeah? But it does feel like it's the same person, isn't it? So the question is, if it's the same person, that means nothing changed in the whole day. That means you ate lunch for nothing. And you sat the whole day for nothing. Yeah, by definition, if you are the same, then nothing changed. And if nothing changed from morning until this point in time, then you have wasted the whole day. And yet, while you wasted, you didn't waste because you are still the same person, so there's no waste also. So what's going on? Did you change or did you not change? Because if you say that you have changed, and you should say you have changed because Bhante put in so much time. Yeah? And that's also why there was the question on universal consciousness and alaya consciousness. Something changed, right? But if something did change, that means you are not the same person as the one in the morning. Yeah? By definition of change, A and then change A prime. Yeah? And by definition of change, the person that was you in the morning is not the same as who you are now. Agree? Then, if you are you now, that means that was not you. You understand what I'm saying? And if that was you, that means this is not you. So which is the real you? And by extension, the moment we think about this question, you have changed. Then the you that you point to is no longer you as well. So where's the real you that you can point to? So in Buddhism, when we say that there's no self, it's not a dogma or doctrine that we have to subscribe to, but it's through rigorous analysis, but not just this mental experiment, but close examination, as Bhante mentioned, vipassana, to go and see for ourselves. Until you are completely, without a shred of doubt, convinced that, this is how it is. There's no fixed entity that you can point to and say this is who you are. But there is you and me in this temporal state of change. There was once I was at this conference, science conference, organized by this Bhagavad Gita society.
Hindu.
Apparently Hindu.
Oh, yes.
I don't know why they keep inviting me. Do I look Hindu or something? But it's part of interfaith. So I went. And then in my talk, I talk about no self. Yeah. And then after that, during the talk, during the session, there was a bit of tension. Yeah. I don't know why they keep on inviting me for interfaith, because I always don't say the very interfaith things. Like I'll tell them, Buddhists do not subscribe to the belief of a creator God. And none of them, and then no self, oh, what is this monk trying to do? You know? So then one participant asked the question, you know, she asked like, so are you saying that there's no self? I say, well, the teaching says so, but we don't go around telling people you must accept that there's no self. So I asked her the same question. I asked her, how do you define the self? Is it permanent or impermanent? And the thing is that in almost practically all the religion I've come across, the definition of a soul or self or whatever you call it, yeah, Atman or Atta, is always about an essence that don't change, that is permanent, everlasting, that doesn't die, is not born, and so on. And so I asked her, is it this way or that way? And then she realized that this tricky monk just put her in a spot, you know. So then I asked her, well, if it changed, then it contradicts your definition, is it? So it shouldn't change. Then all of them were like, okay. And I was like, if it doesn't change, then when you come for this talk and you listen to the talk, did you learn something? And of course she must say yes. Then I say, is the soul involved in the learning? Then they realize that this is the real trap. Because if the soul is involved, that means the soul would change. That means that the definition of soul don't hold true. But if you say that soul is not involved, then what is it for? And not just hearing or learning. Our whole life is about interaction through the eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. And all these interactions involve change. Yeah, just listening itself involves change. Yeah. And so it's through this examination that, well, I didn't manage to, during the conference there was no clear answer. Yeah, because halfway through the organizer was like, oh, okay, thank you so much. Let's take it offline. Yeah. Before all of them start having question mark about that. Yeah, but this is the Buddhist approach. Yeah, we don't just go around telling you that, no, there's no self. Or for that matter, that gentleman, is he still around? The universal consciousness gentleman? Yes. Yeah. Instead of telling you whether there is or not, maybe good to find out from those who say that there is, how do they define it? Yeah. Because anyone can say that there's Superman in this world. You know? Can you prove to me that there's no Superman? Yeah. I can always say that, well, he's still in Krypton, yeah, somewhere out there. But if it's so remote and it doesn't have any impact on our life, then it's as good as non-existence. Yeah. But don't take my word for it. Yeah. Go and find out. Today it may be universal consciousness. Another day it may be something else. But use your wisdom to examine what is the stand that is being purported. And examine for yourself, is it relevant to your life? Yeah? And whether you can verify for yourself that this thing, whether it's universal consciousness or certain entity, that it exists the way it's described. Then you will have the answer yourself. Okay? Time's up.
Time is up. We can end this session. I think later you will have, if I am not wrong, 2 meditation sessions. So thank you all. Special thanks to Venerable Chuan Guan. Thank you all for attending this program. And wait for the other 2 meditation sessions. There may be a break also, as Venerable also mentioned. Too many breaks.
No. I said breaks are important.
Breaks are important, but sometimes no break to our mouth. That's the danger.